Good evening. It's Dan again. Hope you're having a great day, whether it's in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening. But whenever it is, I'm hoping that it's a glorious day for you. It's been a very good, glorious day for me. And so I want to share that with you because today we're dealing with a really hard subject. We're dealing with emotional regulation. And emotional regulation means that we're going to look at the feelings that we talked about in the last portion. And that would be the hurt, anger, fear, the shame, and the joy. Remember, we do have joy. Maybe fleeting, but it's joyful. Okay? So, what we're going to deal with today is how to regulate emotions through understanding the grief process and using forgiveness to get to sorrow, which is the last part of hurt, so that we can grieve the loss that we had that caused the emotions to happen and get on with our lives without the baggage of carrying unresolved emotions with us. So, we're going to begin this and we're going to show the way to let go of our hurt. And remember that the definition for hurt is that we have had an expectation that wasn't met. Okay? So like I came over here today and had to turn in a book that I had forgotten to turn in. It's overdue. I hate to be overdue. So I'm hurt with myself because I had an expectation I didn't meet to turn the book in at a time that is due. But fortunately, the library grants me grace. They don't charge me money no more. And that's good. I like that. So I was able to forgive myself because I did get it over here. But the library had to send me a notice to tell me that I was overdue. Because otherwise I'd have just kept the book and kept reading. But it was a big book. Thick. Like that. So. Okay, so sometimes when we're hurt, like the example that I just mentioned, it's a little hurt. Doesn't really matter. It's easy to get to let go of it. But other times, it's a major trauma. It's big time hurt. Okay? An example of that might be growing up in a family with what I call neglectful parents, who don't really give you any guidance, who don't really nurture you, who don't really teach you about consequential rewards, and then you have to go out into the world and learn all these things for yourself. That's a major trauma. And it can turn into a loss of confidence. It can turn into a loss of self-esteem. It can turn into a soul full of shame. It's a really major loss. And so it takes a lot to deal with that. But regardless of which it is, we'll want to go on with it. So, because it's the same process for both. Okay? So, let's begin with the understanding that because we have expectations, hurt is always going to happen. Okay? It can't not. All right? You get up in the morning and you expect it to be sunshiny and calm and beautiful, and you've planned to have a day that you're just going to sit back and read a good book and eat some chocolate and do all that good stuff and feel warm and fuzzy. That's a good feeling. That's joy. But suppose that the night before you went to bed, you listened to the weatherman and he said, tomorrow's going to be a great day. It's going to be warm and sunny, abundant sunshine, little wind. You can just go out and do whatever you want because it's a great day. And you wake up and it's pouring buckets. It's raining. It's windy. It's not going to let you have the day you thought you would. That's a big hurt. Okay? That's a big loss. And that's what hurt is about. Hurt tells us that we've had a loss. So that was a loss of nature. Okay? But it also was a loss because the weatherman prepared us for a great day, and it wasn't a great day. But he prepared us for that great day because his mind, or his viewpoint, his mindset, looked at all of his facts and said, if everything goes the way it's supposed to, there'll be a great day tomorrow, so I'm forecasting a great day. And we accepted that. But his forecast didn't take into account a major windstorm that brought in rain and wind and cold and all that stuff. So we have a hurt because we listened to the weatherman's chart of truth, which didn't take into the reality of the universe and caused us to make a plan that we couldn't execute. So we get hurt, and then we're going to cover that hurt because hurt is an invisible emotion. We don't really feel hurt. Okay? What we feel usually is either anger or fear. Okay? And that anger can be at someone else, the weatherman. Okay? And we can pass that off by making the joke that the best job in the world I have is a weatherman because you can be wrong all the time and still get paid. That was my attempt at humor. Good one. Anyway, so he went with his chart of truth. We went believing his chart of truth. The universe messed up his chart of truth, and that messed up our chart of truth, and we can't control the universe. No way. Hurt's going to happen. We can't control the weatherman either. No way. Hurt's going to happen. In fact, you can't control anybody else or the universe. You can only control how you deal with your emotional responses when an expectation is not met and when an expectation is met. Remember that expectations not met have the 4 negative feelings. Expectations met have the 1 positive feeling. Right? Research shows that in this country, we have more emphasis on negative stuff than we do on positive. That's a fact. Bad fact. All right. So the person, okay. So one of the ways that we can deal with and begin to learn how to regulate our emotions is what I call a blanket acceptance. And that blanket acceptance is an acknowledgement that hurt's going to happen. And I'll talk about that all day long because people just don't seem to think that hurt happens or is going to happen or has happened, but it does. All right? Anytime we have an expectation not met, we have hurt. But we don't deal with hurt, we deal with anger or fear. If you hurt me, I'll get angry at you. If I don't meet my own expectation, I'll get angry at me. If I'm afraid that you'll hurt me again, I'll live in nervousness or anxiety or fear, scared, afraid, and there'll be a block between our relationship. But if I hurt me, I'm just going to go straight from the frustration of not meeting my own expectations to the fear of not meeting them again to the shame of not having met them. So all the feelings are there. Okay? You can't be hurt without the accompanying feelings of anger, fear, or shame, guilt. Because that's the way we're wired. Right? Remember that when we talked about mind, we talked about the value belief systems, and those 3 belief systems, the right, wrong, good, bad, fair, unfair. So when we look at the expectation being met or not met, we're going to judge whatever's happening with those 3 belief sets. So if it's right, the weatherman was right, we say fair, right, and good, we feel joy, we go out and enjoy the day. If the weatherman was wrong, then we feel the hurt and the sorrow or the sadness of not being able to enjoy the day, and then we get mad at the weatherman for hyping us up and not letting us enjoy the hype. Make sense? Hope so. Okay. So a blanket acceptance, everybody knows what a blanket is, right? We use blankets to cover ourselves up. That helps us survive the cold and the wind and all that stuff, right? So we want to make a blanket in our head of the acceptance of the acknowledgement that hurt's going to happen. Because if we do, and as we practice it, then when hurt does happen, we're not surprised. We eliminate shock. Okay? Because shock is the first feeling, especially with trauma. It's like, this can't happen. Okay? But of course it can, and it does. Okay? So eliminating that shock is what we get from accepting and acknowledging and knowing hurt's going to happen. And there's a process to deal with it. So the biggest thing in terms of emotional regulation is acknowledging hurt happens. It's going to be followed by anger or fear. And depending on who did it, we're going to have shame. Okay? If we did it, we have shame. If they did it, we have anger. So the hardest part of regulation is forgiveness. Okay? The forgiveness comes from acknowledging that your shard of truth is your shard of truth, and for you it's right. My shard of truth is my shard of truth, and for me it's right. When you're right and my right doesn't happen, that's when hurt happens. So when you have a shard of truth that's different than mine, I can argue with you in order to get you to accept my shard of truth as the right truth. But if I do, you're going to defend your truth because your truth is your identity. So we don't want to do that. So instead, what we want to do is accept that each of us has a shard of truth that is our reality and sometimes is not the other person's reality. And if that shard of truth is within our morals, our ethics, and our legality, then we can accept it as that shard of truth, as that right shard of truth for that person, and forgive them for not having the right shard of truth that works for us. Does that make sense? So the forgiveness thing is extremely important. But it's not only forgiving them, because remember, we're going to have those emotional constructs that come, the hurt, the anger, the fear, the shame. We also have to forgive ourselves for having gone to our judgmental set, our judgmental behavior that says, you're wrong, you're bad, you're not fair. Or consequently to our own, it says, you're wrong, you're bad, you're not fair. And we have to understand that that's also an automatic process that's going to happen in our lives, and we forgive that process. We forgive them for having a belief that's not the same as an expectation that is not the same as ours, and we forgive ourselves for having an expectation that they should have the expectation that we have so that hurt wouldn't happen. Because remember, hurt's going to happen. Okay. So the forgiveness thing is the most important part, as I said, of this whole process of emotional regulation. Remember that your emotions are hardwired into your body. You used them to survive and thrive when you had no way to talk or behave. And ever since then, they've been conditioned to your beliefs of what's right, wrong, fair, unfair, good, and bad. So we want to do all of that. And once we do the forgiveness, once we understand that we got angry because it wasn't met, we got angry because the expectation wasn't met, and our fear was because it won't be met again, and the guilt was in terms of we didn't meet it, or they didn't meet it. But once we realize that the unmet expectation becomes a problem. and problems can be resolved. So we look at the emotional response and the intellectual response problem, and we begin to look how to merge them together. And that's what we'll talk about next week. But right now, we want to just acknowledge that as we forgive, then we can go to sorrow, and sorrow is the grief of the loss process. Sorrow is where we really begin to say, okay, I didn't bring the book in time, my bad, I forgive myself, and I'm sad that I didn't do it. I understand that that's going to put some stigma on me when I borrow a book. People will know that I sometimes don't keep track of dates, but I have to accept that's my reality also, and then I have to grieve it, sorrow it, and ultimately let it go. And from it, learn not to do it again. Okay? I try really hard not to overstay my checkout time. But sometimes I don't. So that's how it happens. In our next chapter, we'll examine the problem-solving process. In the meantime, take a moment, take a piece of paper, write out hurt, anger, fear, shame. Look at it in terms of how they can make me feel and how I can make me feel, because we do it both ways. We project our beliefs out on others. And if we believe in the unfair, wrong, bad, good, fair, right, then we're going to project based on those beliefs. So we project out on them. We need to forgive ourselves for projection. Then we introject on ourselves. Those are the two major defense mechanisms we use as people. So then we introject on ourselves, and we need to forgive ourselves. Both parts require understanding the sorrow and the sadness, but the forgiveness lets us go from holding on to a regret that it happened, a letting go, and a getting on with our life. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, 541-325-2118. In the meantime, have a great, great time until we meet again and talk about the intellectual part of problem solving. Bye.